Hello, everybody. How are you today? We are back for another Bible story reading. And for those of you joining for the first time, let me tell you what we do here. We go through the various stories of the Bible so that people can know what they are. Maybe you've only heard some of the stories, bits and pieces of them. Maybe you don't know the entire stories. Maybe you've never learned any of the stories in the Bible. Whatever the reason is, this is an opportunity for you to learn the stories in their entirety. We've been talking about the story of David and how David becomes king. Now, David is not king yet. He is fleeing from the current king, Saul, who is trying to kill him. In the last chapter that we read, David made a covenant with Saul's son, Jonathan. Him and Jonathan were best friends. They were also brother-in-laws because David had married Saul's daughter. And Jonathan was the brother of his now wife, Michal. And Jonathan has told David, "My father has set out to kill you. He's going to kill you." So David is fleeing now. He's running away. All of this time, he has been the king's servant. He's been close to Saul. He's worked for him. He's comforted him. He's been good to him. And he has been the leading member of Saul's great army. So now he is fleeing. He's running away for his life. And we're going to pick up now with 1 Samuel chapter 21. We're really going to read two chapters today. We're going to read 21 and 22 so that we can keep up the momentum of this particular story. David went to the priest Ahimelech at Nob. Ahimelech was afraid to meet David, so he said to him, "Why are you alone and no one is with you?" David answered the priest Ahimelech, "The king gave me a mission, but he told me don't let anyone know anything about the mission I'm sending you on or what I have ordered you to do. I have stationed my young men at a certain place. Now, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever can be found." The priest told him, "There is no ordinary bread on hand. However, there is consecrated bread. But the young men may eat it only if they have kept themselves from women." David answered him, "I swear that women are being kept from us, as always when I go out to the battle. The young men's bodies are consecrated even on the ordinary mission. So of course their bodies are consecrated today." So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from the presence of the Lord. When the bread was removed, it had been replaced with warm bread. One of Saul's servants detained before the Lord was there that day. His name was Doeg the Edomite, chief of Saul's shepherds. David said to Ahimelech, "Do you have a spear or sword on hand? I didn't even bring my sword or my weapon since the king's mission was so urgent." The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take it for yourself, then take it, for there isn't another one here." "There's none like it," David said. "Give it to me." David fled that day from Saul's presence and went to King Achish of Gath. But Achish's servant said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Don't they sing about him during their dances? Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. David took this to heart and became very afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence. He acted like a madman around them, scribbling on the doors of the city gate and letting saliva run down his beard. "Look, you can see the man is crazy," Achish said to his servants. "What do you bring him to me for? Do I have such a shortage of crazy people that you brought this one to act crazy around me too? Is this one going to come into my house?" We're going to go on to chapter 22 now. So David left Gath and took refuge in the cave of Adullam. When David's brothers and his father's whole family heard, they went down and joined him there. In addition, every man who was desperate, in debt, or discontented rallied around him, and he became their leader. About 400 men were with him. From there, David went to Mizpah of Moab, where he said to the king of Moab, "Please, let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me." So he left them in the care of the king of Moab, and they stayed with him the whole time David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, "Don't stay in the stronghold. Leave and return to the land of Judah." So David left and went to the forest of Hereth. Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered. At this time, Saul was in Gibeath, sitting under the tamarisk tree at the high place. His spear was in his hand, and all of his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants, "Listen, men of Benjamin, is Jesse's son going to give all of you fields and vineyards? Do you think he'll make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? That's why all of you have conspired against me. Nobody tells me when my own son makes a covenant with Jesse's son. None of you cares about me or tells me that my son has stirred up my own servant to wait in ambush for me, as is the case today." Then Doeg the Edomite, who was in charge of Saul's servants, answered, "I saw Jesse's son come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, at Nob. Ahimelech required of the Lord for him and gave him provisions. He also gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." The king sent messengers to summon the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and his father's whole family, who were priests in Nob. All of them came to the king. Then Saul said, "Listen, son of Ahitub." "I'm at your service, my lord," he said. Saul asked him, "Why did you and Jesse's son conspire against me? You gave him bread and a sword and inquired of God for him so he could rise up against me and wait in ambush, as is the case today." Ahimelech replied to the king, "Who among all your servants is as faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and honored at your house. Was today the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Please don't let the king make an accusation against your servant or any of my father's family, for your servant didn't have any idea about all of this." But the king said, "You will die, Ahimelech, you and your father's whole family." Then the king ordered the guards to stand by him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they sided with David. For they knew he was fleeing, but they didn't tell me. But the king's servants would not lift a hand to execute the priest of the Lord. So the king said to Doeg, "Go and execute the priests." So Doeg the Edomite went and executed the priests himself. On that day he killed 85 men who wore linen ephods. He also struck down Nob, the city of the priests, with the sword, both men and women, infants and nursing babies, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. However, one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, escaped. His name was Abiathar, and he fled to David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "I knew that Doeg the Edomite was there that day and that he was sure to report to Saul. I myself am responsible for the lives of everyone in your father's family. Stay with me. Don't be afraid, for the one who wants to take my life wants to take your life. You will be safe with me." So there are 3 ways that we look at Scripture. Remember, we have to know what it says. We have to understand the words on the page. Then we have to look at what was it saying to the people of the time. What was the culture? What was the setting? What were the rules, the laws, the history? And what, if anything, is it saying to us today? This is quite the story. This starts out with David fleeing, and he goes to this priest Ahimelech. And he says, "Hey, I'm here on a mission from the king," which was not true. Saul had not sent him to Ahimelech, but Ahimelech did not know that. And he had a lot of respect and reverence for David. And he says to him, David's asking him for some provision so that he can go on this mission that the king is sending him on. and he's asking him for provisions and weapons, and Ahimelech agrees to give him this bread. This bread that they're talking about is this bread that they would make for, my phone rang. They would make this bread for the Lord and set it up, and it was called the showbread. And then they replaced it every day. Well, when that bread was taken down, the people who could eat it were the priests. That bread was for the priests. And a person had to be pure and clean in order to eat that bread. And so he made David promise that the men that were with him were pure and clean, and they were. And so he went ahead and gave David that bread to take with him on this mission that he didn't even know anything about. And then he said he had the sword of Goliath with him, and that David could take that. So he did. And then David flees, and he goes to this other place. He goes to King Achish of Gath. And he's thinking he's going to be able to hide there. But at this point, David's fame has really kind of gone all over the place. Everybody knows about David. And the king says, isn't this David, the one that they sing about? They say David has killed his 10,000s, and David realized, they know who I am, and they could expose me. So he starts acting crazy. He starts digging on the walls and scribbling on them and just acting like a crazy madman. He's let spit run down his beard. And then the king looks at him, he's like, I have enough crazy people around here. I don't need that guy too. So David's able to leave and not get exposed. So he leaves, and it says here that he went to, he took refuge in the cave of Adullam. And when his family heard about this, they all came and joined him, his entire family, but not just them. There were people who were desperate. They were in debt. It says they were discontented. Remember when God had told Samuel, let the people have a king, but they're not going to like it? We're seeing that these people are now really disenchanted with Saul. They are discontented. They don't want to work for Saul. They don't like Saul. They're broke. They're now in debt. They are desperate. It says desperate. And they turn to David. And they're like, you know what? We're on your side. And in that moment, all of a sudden, he acquires this army, basically, of 400 people. So we're seeing that David's kingdom, if you will, is starting to come together, even though he's not king. Okay? So this is all kind of starting to come together. He now has followers. And meanwhile, Saul hears that David and his men have been discovered, and he's talking to his people. Saul starts talking to all of his men, and he's like, how come none of you has had the guts to tell me where David is? You guys didn't even tell me that my own son, Jonathan, made a covenant with David. You all think that he's going to do all this great stuff for you. Is he going to give you fields? Is he going to give you land? Is he going to make you a commander of his armies? And so he's telling the people, he's basically, and one man steps up. This man's name is Doeg. Doeg was there when Ahimelech gave David and his men the bread and the sword of Goliath. He happened to be there, and he steps up. Now he's probably thinking in his mind, I'm going to win some brownie points with Saul here. And Saul's going to make me commander, and he's going to do all these great things for me. And so he steps up and he says, I saw him. And Ahimelech gave him this bread, and he rats him out. Well, now Saul's mad at the priest, and he calls the priests in, and all of his family, all of the priests he calls in. He says to Ahimelech, you conspired against me. And Ahimelech's like, I didn't know anything about this. Last I knew, David was your greatest servant and your greatest warrior. He did great things for you. I had no idea about this. But Saul's not accepting that as an answer, and he orders his men to kill Ahimelech and the priests. But the men are very afraid, and they do not want to lay their hands on the men of God, so they don't do it. So he turns to Doeg, the rat, and he says, you do it. You kill him. And that's what Doeg does. He not only kills Ahimelech, but he ends up killing a whole bunch of people. And then they go to Nob, the city where the priests live, and they slaughter men, women, children, babies, goats, donkeys, sheep, everything. They just wipe out the entire town. So apparently, Doeg cared more about what the earthly king might think about him than what God was going to think about him. And this is where it gets very interesting, because one son named Abiathar, one son of Ahimelech, out of all these people that were slaughtered, escapes. And he goes to David and he tells David everything that has happened to his family, and that Doeg had killed him. And David thinks, and he goes, oh my goodness, I saw Doeg there. I knew Doeg was there, and I knew that he would probably go and rat us out. And he would tell Saul, it's my fault. I'm the reason your family got killed. But don't worry, stay with me. And, the same person that is after you, that wants to kill you, also wants to kill me. But stay with me. There's safety in numbers, and we need to stick together. David didn't say that in so many words, but that's what I get out of it. So there's a lot that we could take away from this story right here. We can talk about loyalty. We can talk about sin. There's so many things that we can take away from this, but I would like for you to decide what this story is saying to you. These were good people who didn't do anything wrong, but bad things happened to them in order to bring about God's will. Sometimes bad stuff does have to happen, seemingly bad. In our eyes, it's bad, but God had to let all of these things happen so that this army of David's could come together. And that's where we're at the story. We're going to leave off now with that, and we will pick up with chapter 23 the next time we are together. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of today's reading, and that you have a good day. God bless you.